Hi there, traders. This is Brad Gilbert with the FX Market Insight for Wednesday, the 5th of May. All right, now just having a look at what's going on now. When you look across the major pairs, let me just come back to the charts first of all and just give you a bit of a heads up what's going on now. We lost that initial momentum from the dollar. Last week's good data counteracted by the weak ISM manufacturing data and a few other things on Tuesday. So we've got this sort of stalemate. And you look at the price action here, dollar Swiss, the dollar index, even dollar CAD, Aussie, Kiwi, well, they're all sort of banging down up and down through sort of short-term trend lines. Now, this is primarily because there's no clear momentum. Okay, these pairs at the top here, dollar index, Swiss, yen, and dollar CAD. The dollar's the base, right? And there's no clear direction or momentum for the dollar to keep going up, right? That's why it's really diffused around these trend lines. And if anything, we've seen a few trend lines on the bottom down here of euro just sort of blown away as well. Now, what's basically happening? It's a bit of a funny one, right? So we had the initial moves on the sort of macroeconomic data, but now what we're seeing is if you just come back into, and I'm using Metastock here for those that aren't aware, just looking at this story here, right? Dollar tries to build rally, eyes major, euro bulwark. Well, don't about the euro sell-off. If you go into this story, you'll see this is the key crux of getting into the sort of news. Now, this is where it gets tricky for the Fed, right? Jerome Powell, the chair. What we're seeing is the ex-chair, Janet Yellen, she's come out here and starting to talk about, well, if the US economy starts to overheat, we're going to have to raise interest rates, right? Well, that's a pretty vanilla, normal thing to say, but she's now the Treasury Secretary. She's not the chair of the Federal Reserve, right? And those comments alone are enough to hit the tech stocks and get the dollar sort of rolling back towards the top side again. We haven't got clear momentum, but what we have got is a sort of a juxtaposition where Janet Yellen, the government now is saying, well, we're going to have to raise rates if the thing starts to overheat. The Fed it's against what the Fed's saying. So really it's going to come down to what happens here with the US non-farm payrolls come Friday, because it's really bringing that data into focus. Right now, it usually is in focus all the time, but now that we've got the US numbers bit up, bit down, we've got Janet Yellen talking about potential interest rate hikes if it overheats. Now we're starting to bring the macros in, because now we have to watch the economic numbers, because they will tell us if the market is overheating, right? So that's how it sort of all connects. So when you come through this week, obviously we've got the Bank of England. Tomorrow we've got a few other things, but the non-farm payrolls are really going to be a key talking point from here. You look at the Treasury yields at the moment, they're very mixed, right? And if I just show you the curve here, it's sort of just moving up and down a lot more freely than without the publicity that it was getting before. So the yields are slightly lower than they were yesterday. Does that impact the dollar? Not really, right? The focus is off the treasuries. They are a bit mixed. We are now starting to talk about what's going to happen with interest rates. Any talk of interest rates going up, the equity markets will go down immediately, right? And that's where you start to sort of piece it together. Now, what does that do for us? Well, it's a bit of a risk-off profile. If the US equities are going down, then the dollar block goes down and the dollar rallies, right? That's what we saw in the North American session. Now, as you go into this Asian session, which we're in at the moment, you usually get a counterbalance of that movement through the day, right? And if anything, the US equity futures, right, give us an insight into where the US equities are going to open up tomorrow, are up, okay? That's a bit of a risk-on play. So what we're starting to see is the US, the risk-on, risk-off equity market is coming back into play, not so much the Treasury bonds just at the moment. Now, that could change day to day, but that's where we are. Keep an eye on the safe havens, right? There's a little bit of a situation here, and I noticed if you look at the Volatility Index, check out this little spike in the Volatility Index yesterday. This is telling me that the market's nervous about what's happening. The contradictory comments from Janet Yellen, right, the Treasury Secretary, against the Fed, It's now sort of starting to paint a bit of a mixed picture, and that creates uncertainty and that creates volatility, right? So the safe havens here could come into play big time. I know Bitcoin's all over this shop, but what we have to do is now wait for the dots to connect. I was going to say for things to connect, but wait for the dots to connect. We're going to get through the Bank of England. No change expected from them. Keep an eye on the euro, right? The euro still, to me, wants to go down, but we need something to give us that drive. Now, there's a bunch of data coming out Friday, and that runs us into the non-farm payroll. So Friday is going to be a big day for euro in particular. Okay, it's looking. It looks fatigued, okay, and I'm like a perpetual euro bear, but this price action here, right? Let me just get my pen, right? This now where it is here. See how there's no trend lines here. It wants to go down. It is starting to trend down short term, but the situation was right. We did have some trend line support here, right? If you come up to here. Right, and it has broken down. If anything, it might be worth leaving that trend line in there so you can see this short-term uptrend. It has finished. It's now sort of trending lower. You can see exactly where it broke down and where the next level of support is. So to me, we really need more clarity around this. Otherwise, what I can envisage happening is, just get the pen up, we just start trading sideways through this trend line if we don't get any clarity around the euro or the US dollar direction. All right, and that's where we are. We're sort of waiting. We're in a holding pattern. As I said, the Bank of England tomorrow, so sterling probably just hanging out. Well, I think you got to start putting some time into dollar yen. Like it's starting to be like a 3-star rating, not the wrong one to be looking at. The dollar, okay, lacking direction here on a number of different things. Dollar CAD, well, oil is rallying again, which pushes like supports a lower dollar CAD, but we're getting that dollar strength, right? So once again, dollar CAD is being pulled from pillar to post, and that's why the price action is quite ugly there. Aussie and Kiwi, two pairs that have had a nice run over the last couple of months, do look fatigued. They are ready to go. So if we get any dollar strength, to me, Aussie and Kiwi would be two pairs I'd feel very comfortable getting short, as I would with euro, sterling. I'm sitting on the sidelines still with that puppy. It's still been doing its own thing. That's where we are, guys. So there's potential opportunities building here, but you just need to be patient, wait for the clarity around the data. At the moment, as I said, if you're in this Asian session, there's a bit of a risk on profile. Equity is up, the dollar block up, the dollar down. That should follow suit as we come into the European session. Check that relationship again, see what the US equity futures are doing, see what the currencies are doing, see if you can piece it together, right? Outside of that, we've got to wait. And unfortunately for us, the real big data is, well, Thursday, Friday, and it might be worth just sitting out and waiting. Some peripheral PMI data coming out of the States. Is that going to be in play? Who knows? But it's like that's third tier data. So I'm not holding my breath on that one. And if anything, there are some PMI numbers coming out of Europe. Keep an eye on those because that may give us a bit more insight into what euro is going to do. At the moment, to me, euro is quite neutral to weak, and the dollar, it's got a little bit of background lingering strength on the back of Janet Yellen's comments. So that points to a lower euro. We just want to get confirmation that that's the way, and then you can really jump into a trade with confidence. All right, guys, have a good trade day. All the best. Cheerio.